Previously on Bourbon Moth Woodworking, I went over to my buddy Josh's shop to build some cabinets. We started out by building some doors, and then we built some bigger panels that were eventually going to wrap the fridge, and then I started making some face frames. And some more face frames, and then I just made some more face frames because, that's what you do. While I was doing that, Josh was ripping down pieces of plywood to make the boxes, and I was still making face frames. Then I took all the pieces Josh ripped down and I made some boxes. Ooh, boxes. When I was done making boxes, Josh made the toe kicks to go under the cabinets while I ate a donut and watched him work. Because that's just the kind of friend that I am. When I was done with my donut, Josh prepared the boxes for the face frames that I spent all that time making. He used the little lamello thing, zip zap zoop, and I glued together some pieces of wood for the drawer faces. Then Josh attached the face frames to the boxes, and I installed all the drawer slides and the drawer boxes, as well as all the drawer faces onto the drawer fronts. I also installed all the cabinet doors, and then, Josh and Rowdy assembled this whole fridge unit. Pretty sweet, and he also installed this cool space-saving little Lazy Susan doodad. And then we worked on the island, installing some more cabinet doors and some more drawer faces, and after a short 4 days in Josh's shop, we had all of the kitchen cabinets for the cabin completely built. Now, Josh has a lot of good characteristics about him, but one of my favorite is the fact that while I was gone for a week, he completely painted all of the kitchen cabinets by himself, and I didn't have to help at all, because I hate painting. With the cabinets painted, they were almost ready to install, but first we needed to make this set of cabinets for the laundry room. Just ignore the upper cabinets, we're not doing those, just lower cabinets. So Josh created this nice cut list on a piece of paper and told me to start cutting. I was like, why do I have to do it? And he's like, why did I have to do all the painting? So I was like, touche, and I got to work. Now I brought over some rift sawn white oak that I had left over from another project because I thought it would be a nice change of pace to not paint cabinets and make them out of some pretty wood. So I selected a few of the choicest pieces of that rift sawn white oak, and I got to work chopping it down into rough parts and pieces so I could start milling everything up. I always like to roughly cut things to length before I start the milling process so I'm not wrestling super long boards across the joiner and planer because that's not very much fun. First I went over to the joiner, I got a flat surface on the face and a flat edge, and then I went over to the table saw and I started ripping stuff down into the appropriate widths. For the face frame and the cabinet doors and all that junk. Once I had all the pieces ripped down to the correct width, then I went over to the planer, and I had to plane them quite a bit because we need 3/4 and I brought over 5/4. So we just, milled a bunch of that material into the garbage can, no big deal. And then I went over to Josh's fancy sliding table saw and started cutting all of my pieces down to their final correct length. Then it was time to start working on assembling my face frame. So I laid out the rough shape of the face frame on top of one of Josh's tables, and I started marking every joint that would need a pocket hole drilled for attachment. Then I went over to Josh's Craig Foreman that's already completely set up, ooh, fancy, nice for pocket holes, and I drilled some pocket holes in the ends of a bunch of pieces of rift sawn white oak. Then, I know you probably saw this coming, I started laying everything out so that I could assemble it using those freshly drilled pocket holes. The way I like to do face frames is lay everything out on a flat surface, and then I cut a bunch of little spacer blocks to ensure that everything is in the appropriate location. I just cut these out of plywood, and it just helps get everything lined up and, more importantly, nice and square. Then I just started gluing and screwing that face frame together like it was nobody's business. I forgot my Festool drill and drivers, so I had to use these stupid Milwaukee ones that Josh had laying around. I mean, look how dumb that looks. And whoever invented these Milwaukee things put the reverse button on the top of the driver, so it is not very user-friendly. While I was busy assembling the face frame, Josh and Rowdy were busy spraying all of our drawer boxes with a nice clear coat of lacquer. Man, it's nice to have a dedicated spray room. And that's pretty much how the morning progressed. I was busy working on my face frame, Josh was busy spraying cabinet boxes with clear coat, and pretty soon the face frame was done, as well as all of those drawer boxes. This is for a laundry room, but it's going to have a farmhouse sink in the middle, drawers on the outside, and cabinet doors on the inside to maximize storage. Once I was done with the face frame, Josh started ripping down pieces of pre-finished birch plywood for the cabinet boxes, and I started working on the cabinet doors and drawer faces. So I milled up some more riffs on oak, and then it was back over to the sliding table saw to cut all my parts and pieces down to the right size. Josh's woodworking apprentice, assistant, helper dude Rowdy took all of the rails, went over to the shaper, and added a nice mortise on the end of them. And then because these are all shorter pieces, I didn't send them through Josh's fancy shaper with a power feed. I just went over to the table saw with a dado stack and added a nice groove to the center of all of my frame pieces. Pretty soon, all of those pieces were cut and fitting nicely, and then it was time to glue up my cabinet doors. Now this is one thing I wish I would have done different. I brought over some 1/4-inch riffs on plywood to use as the panels in the cabinet doors. But if you've ever used veneered plywood before, you know it just doesn't take finish the same way that solid wood does. In hindsight, I should have just glued up some 1/4-inch solid wood panels so everything would match a little better, because as you're going to see at the end of the video, well, the door panels just look slightly lighter than the rest of the cabinet. But that's not what I did. I used plywood, and that's how it's going to be forever. Pretty soon I had the cabinet doors glued up. Now if you watched the last video, I did it the way Josh does it, which is glue up my stiles a little bit on the long side, and then we'll cut everything down to size once they're all glued up. Pretty soon my cabinet doors were in clamps, and I started working on one end panel for the one visible side of the cabinet that's not going to be against a wall. Again, I used that 1/4-inch riffs on plywood, so again this panel's going to look slightly different than the rest of the cabinet. But it is riffs on white oak, so it's going to kind of match, and some people might say, oh, it's just an accent. It looks nice. While I was doing that, Josh was busy affixing the face frame I had constructed to the cabinet boxes that he constructed. Again, using this fancy lamello, which adds these clips, one side of the clip to the face frame, one side of the clip to the cabinet box, and then snap, they just go together. While he was doing that, I started milling up drawer faces out of solid pieces of riffs on white oak. Now I could get a few of the drawer faces out of a single piece, but some of the drawer faces, oopsie doopsie, were a little too big, so I was going to have to glue pieces together. So after getting all my pieces milled, I went over, added a little glue onto one seam, and bloop, I clamped them all together. Giddy up. Keep in mind, this is still day one of this build, which is pretty crazy. Things are moving fast. Before Josh hooked the face frame to the cabinets, he took the time to sand everything nicely. He used the hand sander. I, on the other hand, am far too lazy to sand anything by hand, so I went over to the drum sander to sand all my cabinet doors and then started cutting them down to the correct size. Now, if you didn't watch the last video, basically when I glued these up, I made sure the internal dimension of that panel was perfect. Then I marked 2 inches out from that inside edge, and I cut a line on the sliding table saw. Then I put a stop down to make sure that my cabinet is as tall as it needs to be, and I cut the other side. Now the top and bottom are perfectly 2 inches. Once I have both of those sides cut, well then I take my entire cabinet door over to the table saw and I mark 2 inches out from one of the edges, kind of like you see me doing here. Then I rip that side down on the table saw right on that line. Now one side is exactly 2 inches as well as the top and bottom. Then I just slide the fence over to the exact width I need my cabinet door to be, and boom, I rip down the other side. Now all sides of my cabinet door are exactly 2 inches, it's perfectly square, and it looks so fresh and so clean because I glued it up oversized to begin with. I'm telling you, that Josh guy is really onto something here. Then, of course, I took my 2 cabinet doors over to the face frame and just double checked to make sure that everything was going to fit nice with a perfect 3 30-seconds reveal around all of the edges. And what do you know? Even a blind nut finds a squirrel every now and then. So with my cabinet doors cut to the right size, I cut down this end panel so that Josh could get that glued up to the face frame as well. And then I had to run and go do a podcast. Shop Sounds Podcast. If you're not listening, you should go check it out on all of your podcasting platforms. It's with me and Keith Johnson, and it's pretty good. While I was podcasting, Josh glued that end panel to the face frame, and then he started prepping the box to attach said face frame and end panel to the boxes. By this time, it was the next morning, so I showed up, took my drawer faces out of clamps, and went back over to the drum sander, because I just refused to do anything myself. By the time I had all the drawer faces sanded, Josh was ready to slap this face frame onto the cabinet boxes. So he added a nice little bead of glue, and then, without my help at all, because he is just a monster of a man, he lifted the face frame up onto the cabinet box and was about to hook it in place, and then, well, I ran over to help him out. Not that he needed it, but just because I wanted to be included too. I mean, it's not fair that he gets to have all the fun. I mean, sure, he did all the work to get to this point, but I should be able to take some of the credit. It's my video. Jeez. Yeah, looks pretty good. I gotta say, this whole lamello thing is pretty sweet, because you don't have to use clamps at all. The clips have plenty of clamping pressure to hold the face frame until the glue dries, and then you're pretty much good to go. I helped Josh flip the cabinet over so he could start attaching the toe kick to the bottom of it, and while he was doing that, I took my drawer faces over to the sliding table saw and I cut them all down to the right size, and then I went over to the regular table saw and I cut them all down to the correct width. And then I just couldn't avoid it anymore. I had to pull out the power sander and sand all of my drawer faces, front and back. And while I did that, Josh worked on the surrounds for the washer and dryer that will be at the end of this cabinet unit. Now to finish this cabinet, I'm using Rubio Monocoat, and I wasn't set on the color. I tried mist, I tried mud light, and then I tried a little cotton white mixed with mist, which I have to say I really liked the look of because it looked completely natural. My wife, however, really liked the mist, so I'll let you guess which one we're going with. It's the mist. We're going with Rubio Monocoat Mist. But before I could put finish on everything, I had to drill out the holes on the cabinet doors, so I went back over to Josh's fancy hole drilling machine, and I drilled all the holes in the cabinet doors for the hinges. And with that, I think I'm ready to put finish on this thing. So we moved the entire cabinet off of the work surface and we flipped it over onto the floor in its correct orientation. It was a little heavy, but Josh and I are both incredibly strong, manly men, so well, it was still really heavy and it kind of hurt my back. But we got it on the floor. And then it was time to prepare my finish. Now, I love Rubio Monocoat. You probably know that if you've watched any of my videos because it's so stinking easy to use. I'm using their Oil Plus 2C here in mist color. You just mix the color and the oil, and then you mix the hardener, and then you just stir it up. And then to apply it, you literally just wipe it on and wipe it off. Even a monkey could do it. No offense to monkeys out there. I know they've come a long ways and they can actually use sign language and stuff now. So there's no reason they shouldn't be able to also use finish. No offense. I'm just saying it's a very easy product to use. Rubio Monocoat. Get yours today. Link in the description. Now, even though Rubio's pretty easy to use, I was getting tired of wiping the finish on. So I had Craig drive 2.5 hours over from our shop so he could do it and I could just watch. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't make Craig do all the finishing by himself, at least not on camera. With everything Rubioed up, we were almost ready for install. There was just one last thing I needed to do, and that was fit our farmhouse sinks into both the kitchen cabinets as well as the laundry room cabinets. So I made this little template just out of 4 pieces of MDF, and then I took that template, which I just held together with CA glue, and I traced out the exact shape of the outside of the farmhouse sink onto a bigger piece of MDF. Then I went over to the bandsaw and very carefully I cut that shape out, making sure to stay just on the outside of my pencil line. Ooh, nice. Then I took the hand sander and I brought everything down right to that pencil line to make it perfect. I went back and forth a couple times doing this until I could test the template around the farmhouse sink and it could fit nice and snug. Honestly, you want this to fit a little too snug because you can still sand down your opening after you cut out the shape. Then I hooked the template onto our cabinet box and I just grabbed a multi-tool because that's what was laying around to cut out any excess wood. Then I took a flush trim router bit with the bearing at the bottom closest to the shank and I cut the entire shape out. And then we grabbed the farmhouse sink to see if all of my measurements and everything were correct. I always pull it in from the back because you don't want to have to run the whole sink through that opening. And what do you know? The template trick worked and the farmhouse sink fit in there nice and tight on both sides and was perfectly level at the top. Then I went through this exact same process again for the sink in the laundry room. This one's a little crazier because it's got this whole fluted front panel, but the sides are still essentially the same shape. So I made another template, hooked that onto the laundry room cabinet, and did the whole rigmarole with cutting off the excess and using a flush trim router bit to cut out the exact shape. Then I flipped the cabinet back up onto the floor, grabbed my sink, and nice and tight fit all the way around. Looking good. Yeah. At this point, I thought we were done. And then I remembered we didn't apply any Rubio to the actual cabinet itself. So with Craig starting on one end and me starting on the other, we worked our way inwards until we had everything Rubioed. And then I Rubioed up a piece of 3/4 inch rift-sawn plywood that we'll use to cover up our toe kick, and with that, we were ready for install.
Let me tell you a little story. A few months ago, we were over on the East Coast for a woodworking conference, and Craig really wanted to watch this football game that was only available on the West Coast. So I got on my phone and tried to download a zillion different streaming apps to try and find the football game for him, and all of them said, oh, sign up for a free offer. And, well, it turns out they're not free. I'm getting charged now, and I forget which ones I signed up for, which made me think, what other subscriptions am I signed up for that I don't know about? Well, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. So here I am using Rocket Money to cancel unwanted subscriptions. Rocket Money can safely and securely identify recurring charges and cancels unwanted subscriptions for you. And you can do it all within the app. So you don't need to be on the phone with customer service. It's just a couple taps and boom, canceled. I'm also using Rocket Money to help lower my bills. Simply by taking a picture of my bill, uploading it to Rocket Money, tapping a few buttons, Rocket Money will negotiate my bills for me. So they can help me lower things like my phone bill, my cable bill, internet, all right there on the app. I'm starting to love this thing. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the premium features, with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. To save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/bourbonmoth or click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/bourbonmoth to get started for free. Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. Huge thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video and saving me money as well.
Josh's shop is about 15 minutes from the cabin, so we showed up early the next morning and we started loading all of the cabinet pieces first into the back of my truck very, very carefully so as not to scratch any of the paint. So we just kind of threw everything in there, shoved some moving blankets in between all the pieces, and then wrapped a bunch of cellophane around the moving blankets to hold them in place so they don't fly out while we're driving down the road. At some point, this weirdo Sean from Shaper Origin showed up and decided to lend a hand. He just happened to be driving through. It's a long story. He was on a road trip to buy some beer. I don't know. You can ask him about it. But it was nice to have an extra set of hands. After we got the back of my truck loaded up, I hooked the trailer up and we started loading more cabinets into the trailer. We managed to get the entire island in there, and then we set the entire laundry room cabinet just on top of the island. Because why not? And we still had a little bit of space at the front of the trailer for the remaining cabinets. Then it was into the shop to load up all of the drawer faces and cabinet doors. So Craig very carefully stacked them up with a nice layer of paper towel in between so they wouldn't scratch each other. And I wrapped them all with cellophane so they wouldn't scoot around too much. Then it was off to the cabin. Now, most of the cabinet pieces can go right through the front door, which is nice. But the island is a little big, so we're going to have to get creative with that. Now, I'm also going to tell you something. You're going to see a set of stairs in this video, and you're going to be like, those are ugly stairs right now. But I'm just going to foreshadow a little bit. Those stairs may or may not have been temporarily built just so we could pass final inspection. And I may or may not be tearing those stairs out after we pass final inspection to build the real stairs. But I'm not going to confirm or deny that because, well, you never know who's watching these videos. So just don't judge the stairs too much right now. Pretty soon we had all of the cabinets out of the trailer and into the house, the laundry room cabinets in the laundry room, the kitchen cabinets in the kitchen, and everything was going pretty smooth. Until it was time to haul that monster island that for some reason we decided to build in one piece into the house. And the only way to do it was to go on a little walkabout. We had to go out of the trailer, into the woods, past a bunch of trees, over some pine needles and some stumps, into the mysterious unknown, past some more trees, around the back of the house, up one flight of stairs, up a second flight of stairs, around a pretty tight corner. Then we had to walk across the deck, and then we had to skirt the edge of the house, watch out for that tight corner around the chimney, to the back deck, and then we could open the double sliding doors, safely bring the entire kitchen island in through the back door. Whew. Not the easiest trek I've ever made, but we got it in the house in the end, and that's the most important part. I have to say, it was very helpful to have a few extra set of hands, because I don't think there's any way me and Josh could have done that by ourselves. Oh yeah, I forgot, after that we had one more cabinet box to unload out of the back of my truck. And by one more, I mean like 4 more, but that's not important. The important thing is eventually all of the cabinet parts and pieces were inside the house and we were ready to install. Now, Josh built these cabinets in his way. Well, me and Josh built these cabinets in the way that Josh typically builds cabinets. So when it came to installing, I just kind of stood back and let Josh do his thing because he definitely knew how he wanted to do it. Now, he starts very much the same way that I do. First things first, you get your toe kicks in, shimmed, and perfectly level. So we're on the same page there. With his first toe kick installed, I came in behind him and started installing the actual cabinet boxes. Now, because the toe kicks are already perfectly leveled and hooked to the wall, installing the cabinet boxes is as simple as just setting them on top and then screwing them through the inside of the cabinet to the toe kick to hook everything together. We got the first cabinet in place, then there was a little break for what will be the stove, and then we installed the second cabinet, which will go all the way into that corner, and then more cabinets will be built off of it. Now, when you're installing multiple cabinet boxes in a kitchen like this, it's really important to stop every once in a while and just double check that everything is level. Not just the individual boxes, but one box to another box, because the countertop people are not going to be very happy if they're all different heights. At this point, everything was going so smooth, and I figured we're going to be done with this before lunchtime. And then Josh started working on the third toe kick, and we ran into a problem. You see all that piping coming out of the wall on the right side? Yeah, that's a vent and a drain and some other pipe. Well, they're a little too far to the right, and they're actually going to be in the wrong cabinet box and not under the sink where they need to be. So we had to call the plumber. While we waited for him to show up, we ate some lunch. And here's the crazy thing. We called this plumber, and he was at the house 15 minutes later. Considering the house is 15 minutes outside of town, I'm not even sure how that's physically possible. So, big gold star to this guy who showed up immediately and moved those pipes over for us. But not wanting to have a delay in our progress while he was fixing the pipes, we decided to go into the laundry room and get all the laundry room cabinets installed. Now, we assembled our main section of cabinets back at Josh's shop, but there's this other section of cabinets that's going to house the washer and dryer that we built in separate pieces and assembled on site. To assemble this, we just use more of these lamello clips. These ones have a little Allen key, so once you get them together, you can stick that Allen key in through a pre-drilled hole on the side and lock everything in place. Now, we purposely built these cabinets too tall because we weren't exactly sure on the height of the washer and dryer, but the washer and dryer were at the house. So once we got there and could measure their exact height, we used the track saw to cut our cabinet units down to the appropriate size. Zip, zap, zoop. Then, with everything cut to the right length and assembled, it was as simple as flipping it over and scooting it into place. When you build cabinets like these, it's always important to use your head, as you can see me doing right there. It's hard and, well, it's good at moving things around. We got everything shimmed and leveled and square, and then we started attaching the cabinet to the wall to hold it in place until we could get the other cabinets in. Again, Josh started with the toe kick, making sure that was all nice and level, and then he measured off of our washer-dryer cabinet over to those water and drain hookups, and we had to drill some holes in the back of the cabinet. If you didn't think I was helping, you could see I was holding the tape measure there for him, so I was doing something. Josh does installs like these all the time, so he's got all these tools set up with the right size bits and everything to drill out all the holes, and he's pretty good at making sure all of his measurements are perfect the first time. Must be nice. So with all the holes cut for our plumbing hookups, we slid our main bank of cabinets onto that toe kick and attached it to our washer and dryer unit and to the wall and the toe kick itself, and then I grabbed the farmhouse sink and plopped that in place. And those cabinets were, bloop, installed. By the time we were done installing all the cabinets in the laundry room, the plumber had successfully moved all of that piping over to the left, and now it should fit nicely inside of our next bank of cabinets. Albeit there is a giant hole in the drywall that I'll have to fix later, but for now, the pipes are in the right spot, and that's all that matters. While Josh secured that next set of cabinets, I added this little return onto that corner unit to create a space for the dishwasher to slide into. I just screwed that in from the inside of the cabinet, and then it was time to start assembling the fridge surround. Now, this is something that Josh does different than the way that I do it. Typically, I build the fridge surround in my shop in one giant piece and then awkwardly carry it into the house, trying not to break it or anything else as I move it around. Where Josh builds it in multiple pieces and just assembles it in place. You can see he got that first panel installed on the left, then he attaches all of these pieces of plywood to the back wall, right into studs, and those are pre-drilled with pocket holes on either end. Then he adds some shims behind the piece on the right side. I'm going to tell you why here in just a second. And he brings in his next panel. Now there's tape on the edge of that panel because if he needs to, he can scribe the edge of that panel to perfectly fit against the wall and then mirror whatever he cut off of that panel onto the other panel so they both stick out the same distances. Once he's got his panels all fitted correctly, then he installs this upper cabinet unit. Again, just using lamellos with that little Allen key so he can get them nice and tight. You get them installed to one panel, then you set the next panel in place, hook them in, and tighten those ones down. And then you use those pocket holes in the back to secure your panel. Once it's all secured, you pull those shims out, and that void is going to snap back against the wall, making sure that right panel is as tight as it can be against the wall. While he was getting all that fiddled with, I installed the cabinet doors, and boom, fridge surround completely done, installed, and in place. Then I went around and covered up all of our toe kicks with just some painted pieces of 1/2-inch plywood. To do this, I cut them to size, added a little bit of construction adhesive to the back, and then I just pushed with my fingers. Bloop, and goodbye toe kick. Hello, beautifully painted wood. I was actually really happy that I was doing this right now, because when I installed my kitchen cabinets, I didn't install that little painted piece until like 2 years after I put the cabinets in place. So, take that, wife. I'm just joking. I love you, honey. Then, pretty much just to get it out of the way, we wheeled the fridge into the fridge cabinet. Well, we also wanted to make sure that it would fit and that it wasn't too tight or too loose. I don't love the gap above the fridge between the fridge and the cabinet, but according to the fridge manual, you have to leave a 2-inch gap for ventilation, so whatever. Then it was time to start working on our island. Now we measured off the corner of the fridge and the corner of the other cabinets over by the stove to make sure that we could get our toe kick nice and square to all of our other cabinets. Then we used a laser level and some shims to make sure that it was all level and square and the right height and all that jazz. And it was time to secure the toe kick to the floor. Now, to secure a toe kick floating in the middle of the floor, the easiest thing to do is just cut some scrap pieces of 2x4. You stick them inside the toe kick and you screw the pieces of 2x4 to the floor. This kind of locks your toe kick in place and keeps it from sliding around. Then you take some more screws from the outside of the toe kick right into that 2x4. This really locks everything in place and makes sure that that toe kick is not going to go anywhere. Then all you got to do is hook the island to the toe kick and boom, locked in forever, and you can bang your knees and hips on it for the rest of your life and it's not going to scoot across your floor. Now I thought this was pretty smart. After we got the toe kick installed, Rowdy took some scrap pieces of 3/4-inch ply and laid them on top of the toe kick. At first I was like, what the heck are you doing? And then Josh was like, oh, you'll see, just watch. Then we took the entire island and set it on top of the toe kick and on top of those scrap pieces of 3/4-inch ply. Now you might see that the island is floating above the floor at this point, which apparently is by design. Then Josh took a scrap piece of 3/4-inch ply and a scribe, and he scribed a nice line across the bottom of the island, 3/4 of an inch up off of the floor. Then we lifted the island back off of the toe kick very carefully onto some moving blankets so we didn't scratch up the floor. Also trying to just rotate it off of the toe kick so that eventually we can easily rotate it back on to the toe kick. Once we had the entire thing flipped over upside down on the moving blankets, we removed the tape that was sliced by that scribing tool. Are you seeing where I'm going with this now? And then Josh pulled out the track saw and cut perfectly along that scribed line. You see, if you've installed cabinets for any length of time, you're going to realize something really quick. No floor is ever perfect. So the best thing you can do is always overbuild the height of your cabinet and scribe everything to fit in place, which is exactly what Josh was doing here. He cut that scribe line with the track saw on both ends. Then we removed those 3/4-inch spacer pieces on top of the toe kick and very carefully rotated the entire thing back in place. And wait for it, boom. Well, move the moving blanket out of there, you moron. Okay, there, boom. Now the entire island is perfectly scribed to the floor and looks much better than if we just would have plopped it on top of that toe kick. With all of our cabinet boxes installed, it was a mad dash to get all of our drawers in place, our cabinet doors back on, our drawer faces installed, but between me and Josh, we got this done lickety-split. It was honestly so fun building these cabinets with Josh. If you're not subscribed to Northeast Woodworks on YouTube, you should head over there right now and subscribe to his channel. He is pumping out some amazing content, and I have learned so much from him already. There are definitely a few things I learned, especially on the install process, that I will for sure be using from here on out. By the end of the day, we had all of our cabinet doors, drawer faces on, all the cabinets in place, and I showed up a few days later to install the hardware. My wife picked out this nice unlacquered brass, which honestly is one of my favorite hardwares to use because it patinas over time and it gives the kitchen a really nice vibe. Now, I don't know if you've watched all of the cabin build series up to this point, or maybe this is the first video you've ever watched on my channel, but if you had a chance to see the kitchen when we first purchased this cabin, you will realize that this is a huge upgrade, and I could not be more excited with the progress we're making on this property. Sure, there's still a long ways to go. We've got to get countertops on and tile backsplash installed, but we're getting there. Oh, and the outro that you're about to see, I actually filmed before I installed the hardware, so that's why there's none on the cabinets. Goodbye.
Oh, wow. That was a doozy. That was a lot of cabinets in literally a week, but we got it done. And I gotta say, I love the way these turned out. Josh was a maniac. I mean, that guy really knows how to make cabinets. And I just am gonna say, I don't think I could have done this without him. I mean, I probably could have done it. It would just taken really, really long, and it wouldn't be done yet. It'd be done in like a month. But here we are, cabinets installed. We still got to get countertops in, and then obviously faucets and all that. And there's a whole slew of other things to do in the cabin, but this is a big step. And we're really close to actually being able to stay here, because every time I come over here now, I have to rent a place, and that costs money, but it's almost livable. The projects, though. The projects will go on forever. If you're not following Josh, you should definitely do so. He also made a video on this entire process over on his YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the profile and his logo up here on the screen. You should go watch his videos and subscribe because he's amazing. And like I said, couldn't have done this without him.